Hello and welcome to World News Program coming to you live on All24 News. I'm your host Islam Said, and up next are the top stories. The International Court of Justice urges global non-recognition of Zionist authority over occupied territories in an advisory opinion. And one dead, several injured in a drone explosion in occupied Palestinian territories. Houthis claim the attack. During the African Union Defense and Security Committee, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf stressed that North Africa's capacity accelerates the African Stand-by Force project and called for addressing legal shortcomings hindering its activation. Also coming up, 16 presidential candidates submit their files in Algeria's presidential elections. Election Authority reviews applications before submitting the final list to the Constitutional Court. Stay tuned to the details right after the break. Hello and welcome to the program. 8 Palestinians, including children, were killed in an airstrike on the Abu Shakian family's home in Nusayrat camp. Another airstrike killed 6 from the Abu Hassanin family in Burij camp. 2 others died in airstrike on a school sheltering displaced people in Gaza City. And Tel Aviv neighborhood faced heavy shelling. Zionist military targeted a home in the town of Al-Qarara north of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, according to local sources. Meanwhile, other sources reported artillery shelling and gunfire from Zionist vehicles and helicopters on several sites west of Rafah. Concerns of famine in Gaza grow as the war continues. Families struggle for food while occupation forces keep crossings closed, blocking aid and using starvation as a weapon. More details with Hussein Barkan.
Inside the charity kitchen in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza Strip, women struggle daily to prepare whatever food they have. Empty pots and the cries of hungry, exhausted children fill the air.
We come to this charity kitchen since the morning, so we get to have a plate by sunset. We fathers don't eat. We let our children eat, because the plate is barely enough for our children. This is why we leave the children to eat. This is all amid the famine we are facing in north of Gaza. It is increasing day after day. The crisis of food, the crisis of water. We suffer from all types of crises in northern Gaza, and on top of it, a hunger crisis.
Parents endure immense pressure to ensure their children have enough to eat, given the scarcity of meals and humanitarian aid.
We adults have to be strong, but our son, we hit our son when he screams from hunger for him to shut up, so he sleeps hungry. We don't have a choice but to come, stand here all day with our children to be able to get them this plate to eat, to feed some of their hunger.
Life is extremely difficult for those in northern Gaza who cling to staying. They struggle to adapt to the lack of almost everything, with children facing the harshest conditions.
We call on all Arab nations, the United Nations, the World Food Programme, all the nations that care for human rights. What is the fault of our children to stay hungry? Why do we have to be punished this punishment as civilians? We don't have to do with this or anything. We are civilians. We just used to work to make our daily living.
Official reports state that more than 500,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip face the most severe or catastrophic level of food insecurity. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Mission, a global monitoring body supported by the United Nations, says Gaza remains at high risk of famine as the war continues and aid access is restricted.
The International Court of Justice declared the Zionist occupation of Palestinian territories illegal and urged occupying Israel to end its presence immediately. The court called for a halt to new settlements, the removal of settlers, and compensation for Palestinian losses, condemning occupation's policies of discrimination and settlement. ICJ President Nawaf Salam emphasized respecting the unity and sovereignty of occupied Palestinian territories, stating that occupying Israel has violated the Anti-Racial Discrimination Treaty and the Palestinian right to self-determination since 1967.
Its policies and practices, both in relation to East Jerusalem and to the West Bank, with a view to determining whether they amount to annexation, the Court comes to the conclusion that Israel's policies and practices, including the maintenance and expansion of settlements, the construction of associated infrastructure and the wall, the exploitation of natural resources, the proclamation of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the comprehensive application of Israeli domestic law in East Jerusalem, and its extensive application in the West Bank entrench Israel's control of the occupied Palestinian territory, notably of East Jerusalem and of Area C of the West Bank. These policies and practices are designed to maintain in place indefinitely, to remain in place indefinitely, and to create irreversible effects on the ground.
The president of the International Court of Justice stated that occupation settlement policies and exploitation of natural resources in the occupied Palestinian territories violate the international law. Let's take a listen.
The nature of Israel's acts, including the fact that Israel frequently confiscates land following the demolition of Palestinian property for reallocation to Israeli settlements, indicates that its measures are not temporary in character and therefore cannot be considered as permissible evacuations under the Fourth Geneva Convention. In the Court's view, Israel's policies and practices are contrary to the prohibition of forcible transfer of the protected population under Article 49, Paragraph 1 of the Fourth Geneva Convention.
The Zionist occupation army confirmed that a drone exploded in Tel Aviv in the occupied Palestinian territories at dawn on Friday, causing 1 death and injuries. Zionist media reported hearing the sound of a huge explosion on Ben Yehuda Street in central Tel Aviv. For its part, the occupation police announced that the body of a person was found with traces of shrapnel from the explosion, while the emergency aid confirmed that 3 people were injured. The Houthis in Yemen claimed responsibility for targeting occupied Yafa, or what is known as Tel Aviv, with a drone attack as part of the ongoing operations in support of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The military spokesperson for the Houthi group in Yemen, Yahya Sariyah, said in a statement that the Air Force carried out a qualitative military operation targeting one of the important targets in the occupied Yafa region.
The drone force of the Yemeni Houthi armed forces, with Allah's help, carried out a qualitative military operation that targeted one of the important targets in the occupied Yafa area, called as Tel Aviv by the Israelis. The operation was carried out using a new drone aircraft named Yafa, capable of bypassing the enemy's air defense systems and undetectable by our radars. The operation successfully achieved its objectives.
Palestinian factions praised the Houthi group's attack on Tel Aviv in the Palestinian occupied territories. Hamas highlighted the targeting of the Zionist entity's core, calling it a rightful act of resistance. Meanwhile, Islamic Jihad movement affirmed that resistance is the only way to counter Zionist and Western arrogance. The Mujahideen movement, for its part, also hailed the actions of Yemen and other resistance groups as honorable efforts to support the oppressed Palestinian people. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf commended the African Union Commissions for announcing the operational readiness of the North African capability, a key component of the African Standby Force. In his speech addressing the report of the Defense and Security Committee at the 45th session of the African Union Executive Council in Accra in Ghana, Attaf highlighted that this readiness marks significant progress towards activating the African Standby Force. He emphasized the urgent need to this mechanism to address the continent's escalating security threats.
وبين الأذرع الخمس للقوى الإفريقية الجاهزة نشيد بإعلان مفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي.
We commend the African Union Commission's announcement of the operational readiness of the North African capability, which is one of the 5 pillars of the African Standby Force. This announcement follows field assessments conducted by the United Nations and African experts of the capability's various components, including its military, civilian and logistical resources. This announcement follows field assessments conducted by the United Nations and African experts of the capability's various components, including its military, civilian and logistical resources, which fully meet all international standards in this field. The achievements of the North African capability truly deserve praise and encouragement. The readiness of this capability brings us closer to implementing the continental project of the African Standby Force, especially as our continent increasingly needs this crucial mechanism to address the growing security threats facing our countries and peoples, as well as the escalating and expanding conflict zones within our continent.
وازدادت حدة في قارتنا.
Attaf urged addressing the legal shortcomings hindering the activation of the African Standby Force, including the Memorandum of Understanding between the African Union Commission and the force's components. Let's take a listen.
In light of this, the delegation calls for the adoption of the presented report and its accompanying draft resolution. It also reiterates the call to expedite addressing the legal deficiencies that still hinder progress towards operationalizing the African Standby Force, particularly the Memorandum of Understanding expected to be concluded between the African Union Commission and the 5 pillars of the African Standby Force.
Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf urged through consideration of how to leverage the African continent's permanent membership in the G20 to advance its growth and development priorities. Speaking at a session on the African Union's involvement in the G20 during the 45th session of the African Union Executive Council, Attaf emphasized that the Union's participation in the G20 meetings should serve a greater purpose and not be seen an end in itself.
لعضوية دائمة في مجموعة ال20 مؤثرة.
Securing permanent membership for our continent in the G20 is truly a valuable and strategic achievement in every sense of the word. However, it is noteworthy that over the past few months, we have merely celebrated this achievement without delving into how to utilize it to serve our continent's priorities and aspirations in various areas of growth and development. While it is true that we have previously addressed the issue of representing the African Union in the G20 meetings at various levels, participation alone is not an end in itself.
لكن المشاركة ليست غاية بحد ذاتها.
The Algerian Foreign Minister emphasized the importance of the African Union focusing on 2 key issues: preparing for the G20 meetings and defining the goals to be achieved through its membership in the group.
يعتقد هذا الوفد بأن هناك مسألتين.
This delegation believes that there are 2 fundamental issues that deserve our utmost attention and care. The first issue is procedural and concerns. The question that arises here is, should the Commission be entrusted with this task, or would it be better for the Member States to handle it? Or is it more appropriate to combine the preparation efforts of the Commission and the Member States? From our perspective, an issue of such importance requires the mobilization of member states to study the topics on the G20 agenda and formulate unified positions on them. Therefore, we support the proposal to hold an extraordinary session of the Executive Council next September to prepare for the upcoming G20 summit. The second issue is substantive and essential, concerning the identification of the goals we aim to achieve through the African Union's membership in the G20 and how to leverage this membership to advance our continent's strategic priorities, particularly those related to the reform of international financial and monetary institutions, structural resolution of global debt, and international development financing.
الدولية والمعالجة الهيكلية للمديونية العالمية والتمويل الدولي للتنمية.
On the second day of the African Union Executive Council 54th session or 45th session, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf engaged in a series of high-level meetings with his counterparts. Attaf discussed major continental and international issues with South African Foreign Minister, exploited Sahel-Saharan regional developments with Nigerian Foreign Minister, and reviewed bilateral cooperation with his Ethiopian counterpart as well. Additionally, he conferred with Sierra Leone Foreign Minister on Security Council coordination, with Zimbabwean Foreign Minister on strengthening ties with Republic of Congo's counterpart on upcoming AU engagements, and with Democratic Republic of the Congo's Foreign Minister on enhancing bilateral relations. To Algeria now, the deadline of submitting declarations of the candidacy for the Algerian presidential elections expired on Thursday night. The National Independent Election Authority has begun reviewing the validity of the candidacies submitted by 16 candidates. The Election Authority sends its decisions regarding the candidacies, along with the candidacy files, to the Constitutional Court within a maximum of 1 day from the date of issuance. If a candidacy is rejected, the candidate has the right to appeal this decision to the Constitutional Court within 2 days of being notified. The Constitutional Court finalizes the decision on the list of candidates, including the appeals, within a maximum of 1 week from the date of receiving the last decision from the Election Authority. The would-be candidate from Alliance for Stability and Reform, Belqasem Sahli, submitted his candidacy to the Algerian presidential election on Thursday evening at the headquarters of the Independent National Authority for Elections in Algiers. In a statement to the press following the deposit process, Sahli stressed the necessity of making the upcoming presidential election a success, enabling the citizen to perform their electoral duty.
First of all, I would like to thank the Independent National Authority for Elections, headed by Dr. Mohamed Sharfi. I would also like to thank all executives and authority members for the good organization of this process. Making the elections successful means enabling citizens to perform their popular sovereignty.
Saida Naghza, aiming to run in the presidential elections on September 7th, submitted her candidacy file on Thursday evening at the headquarters of the Independent National Election Authority at the Palace of Nations in Algiers. In a statement to the press following the submission, the would-be candidate Naghza highlighted its significant role of Algerian women throughout the country's history, particularly during the Liberation Revolution. She also expressed her appreciation for the support and guidance provided by the Independent National Election Authority to all prospective candidates.
In appreciation for the role of Algerian women, especially during the Liberation Revolution, I also want to thank the Independent National Elections Authority for their support and guidance.
Zubida Assoul, the would-be candidate who wishes to run in the presidential election scheduled for September 7th, submitted her candidacy file on Thursday at the headquarters of the Independent National Election Authority, the Palace of Nations. In a statement to the press following the submission, Assoul emphasized that her candidacy is a serious and significant decision. She highlighted her comprehensive electoral program, which aims to develop the country, protect families, and achieve prosperity and economic growth.
أعتقد أن الجزائر اليوم تحتاج
Algeria today needs the effort of all its people, both inside and outside the country, to build a strong nation. We aim to move from a state ruled by individuals to a state of institutions, law, freedoms, and development. Running for the presidential elections is a serious and crucial decision for me, and I am committed to improving the conditions of our country.
The would-be candidate Abdel Hakim Hamadi submitted his candidacy to the Algerian presidential election on Thursday. In a statement to the press after the deposit process, Hamadi expressed his hope for the development of all Algerian institutions, praising the development and experience possessed by the Independent National Authority for Elections.
When we talk about development, we talk about the Algerian organizations that we hope will be in progress status. We think that the Independent National Authority for Elections is developed in terms of candidacies examination, in addition to its development in its treatment to candidates and everything related to this electoral process.
Still with elections, but now in Tunisia. Tunisian President Kais Saied announced on Friday his official candidacy for a second term in the upcoming October 6 elections. In a speech delivered from Burj Al Khadra in the southern governorate of Tataouine, President Saied stated that his decision to run again is in response to the call of national duty, aiming to continue the struggle in what he described as the national liberation battle. He has set October 6 as the date for the presidential elections in the country. In the United States now, former U.S. President and Republican candidate for the upcoming U.S. presidential elections, Donald Trump, pledged to be a president for all Americans if he is elected next November. Trump addressed the Americans after accepting his nomination for the Republican Party for the third time, and called on the Americans to unite and stop what he called the criminalization of opposition and the demonization of political differences. Trump expected to achieve victory in the upcoming elections.
They've got to stop that because they're destroying our country. We have to work on making America great again, not on beating people. And we won. We beat them and all. We beat them on the impeachments. We beat them on indictments. We beat them. But the time that you have to spend, if they would devote that genius to helping our country, we'd have a much stronger and better country.
A global internet outage disrupted airlines, telecommunications, media, banks, and major trading markets. Major companies halted all flights on Friday, leaving thousands of travelers stranded at airports. Nabil Khazini reports.
The world woke up this Friday morning to a sudden global technology failure, which caused airlines, medical services, television broadcasting, banks, and dozens of other businesses and services to stop in most parts of the world. Described as the biggest IT outage the world has ever seen, the scale of the breakdown was evident, particularly at airports across the world, where a tsunami of passengers flooded airports' halls. Thousands of flights were cancelled globally. Check-in has to be done manually in some cases.
I feel awful for everybody whose flights are getting cancelled. People going to things like funerals or stuff of that situation. This is unacceptable.
The thing that I would say is probably we need to, as a nation, look into our technology dependence, because if things like this occur, what's going to happen? So maybe we need to have a backup plan as a nation.
While the breakdown is not a cyber attack, the IT outage is linked to a failure upgrade by CrowdStrike. a cybersecurity program that many airlines and banking companies use to protect their PC systems. CrowdStrike has admitted to being responsible for the error that hit Microsoft apps and operating systems and said a fix has been deployed.
This outage was caused by an update to the CrowdStrike software that was released tonight. It was between 6 and 7 a.m. more or less Italian time. So any computers that did not receive the software outages at that point during the night or during the early morning will probably not be affected later today. Those computers that were already on, or those computers that are always on, like servers, that have received this update will most probably lock up with a blue screen and then keep locking in a blue screen every time they are rebooted.
While it's time now for Microsoft to work on solutions to prevent a failure like that, those affected will start to ask for a compensation for the damage done.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, check our social media platforms. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.